Assalamu alaikum. My name is Ibrahim Khan from Islamic Finance Guru. Is insurance haram or halal? This is a deep and controversial topic. Typically at Islamic Finance Guru, we take the majority fiqh position on most issues. However, in this video, I want to share with you why, in our humble view, insurance should be viewed as permissible. This is a minority view, but it is a view shared by some serious and heavyweight scholars such as Sheikh Mustafa Zarqa, Sheikh Ali Al-Khafif, and even some contemporary scholars. And so the way we'll structure this video is, firstly, I'll explain to you the basic concepts and issues that underpin this whole debate, and then I'll give you three key arguments for why insurance should be viewed as permissible in our view. So the basic premise that I want you to keep in mind throughout this video is that Islam and the fuqaha unambiguously allow us to mitigate our losses by pooling wealth and paying out in the case of an uncertain or unexpected loss. I know that's a lot of words, let me give you an example. So in traditional Arabia, you have a tribesman, he accidentally kills someone, or even on purpose, and because of that he has to pay blood money of 100 camels. Now that's like, paying 100 Ferraris, that's a lot of money, and no individual can do that. So the tribe's people of that tribe would actually get together and pool their wealth in order to pay that blood money on behalf of that individual. So on the basis of that, the fuqaha came up with this Takaful insurance concept, which is like cooperative insurance, which is based on that blood money idea. Inshallah, we'll discuss more on that later, but right now just keep that in mind. Mitigating losses by pooling wealth together and paying out in case of an uncertain event is permissible. It's just the how that happens and the concepts and structures around it that are under debate. The arguments against conventional insurance are threefold. Firstly, that there's interest or riba involved. Secondly, that there's gharar or uncertainty involved. And finally, that there's gambling or maisir involved. In this video, I focus on the most difficult of these objections, and that is gharar. Islam forbids transactions in which there is excessive gharar. So the argument in the insurance context is that you're buying a premium for a product where you may or may not actually have a payout in that year. So you buy some car insurance, you may not have an accident in that year, and that is seen as gharar. So Takaful or cooperative insurance is seen as permissible by the fuqaha because Islamically it is seen as a gift by the person who contributes that money into the pot. They're not legally expecting anything to come out of it for them. So in the case of the guy who got some blood money from the tribesman, his tribesmen didn't legally have to pay that money over, they did it out of their goodwill. But having considered the arguments against conventional insurance, I'm of the view that insurance in most of its forms should actually be seen as permissible, and the kind of gharar that Islam and the hadith are trying to prohibit is not the kind of gharar that is contained within conventional insurance. Let me explain further with these arguments. So what does Islam and the Prophet ﷺ actually say about gharar? Here are a few hadith to give you a bit of a flavor. Imam Muslim narrates from Abu Hurairah, he said that the Messenger of Allah forbade sales of a speculative nature, bay' al-gharar. And what does this mean? Tirmidhi, he records the Prophet said, do not sell that which you do not have. لا تبع ما ليس عندك. That indicates that this whole gharar aspect is a lot down to avoiding of dispute and for clarity over exactly what's happening. If you're trying to sell something that you don't have, that will lead to dispute if, for example, you don't actually manage to get what you've sold. So let's say you've sold something, let's say you've sold £5 worth of sugar, but you don't actually have that sugar. Now, that person who you've sold it to, they will want that sugar, and you have to go away and find that sugar. So if you sold it and you don't ultimately manage to get that sugar, that transaction becomes the potential for a lot of dispute. So that underpins what the issue is here. Then there's another hadith. Ahmad and Ibn Majah record, the Prophet ﷺ has forbidden the purchase of unborn animals in its mother's wombs, the sale of milk in its udder without measurement, the purchase of the spoils of war prior to their distribution, the purchase of charities prior to their receipt, and the purchase of the catch of a diver. And Ahmad similarly records, the Prophet forbade the purchase of a runaway slave. So all of these things, the forbidden aspect is because we don't actually know whether or not that item will ultimately be in the possession of that person and what the quantity of that item is. If it's milk in an udder, we don't really know how much milk there's going to be there. If the diver is diving into the ocean, we don't actually know how much he's going to come out with at the end of his catch. So those are the reasons why the Prophet ﷺ, he forbade gharar in these kind of situations. So the critic would say that the fundamental issue in an insurance contract is that we don't really know, neither the insurance company knows nor the individual receiving the insurance, purchasing the premium, know whether or not they're going to be having a car accident or not. Now, the issue with this approach is that it ignores the potential for big data. Insurance companies are not stupid. They have worked out to the nth degree exactly what their premium should be based on the various different models for risk that they have. Due to the multiple models and due to the tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands and millions of data points that they have, they can very accurately predict exactly how many car accidents on average that we have in the UK, and on average what is the risk for each person having a car accident. And similarly, in the case of the diver, Prophet ﷺ, he talks about the diver and you don't know how much that diver is going to come back with. But let's say you're Tesco and you're buying millions and millions of pounds worth of fish every year, and you need to enter into a transaction that's a year-long contract with this fisherman company. Then you would look at the historic data and you would have a really good idea, on average over the year, what is the kind of fish volume that's going to emerge. And on the basis of that and the average that you can get out of that, that reduces the risk to such a level that it becomes much less risky about, it's not punting about what the fisherman is going to do when he goes out on the catch on a morning. It's about averaging out what this robust operation is going to do over the year when it goes out every day, and we have historic data that tells us this is the numbers that it's going to do. So we know that the insurer has a degree of certainty about what they're going to be pricing this insurance premium at. But what about the consumer? How are they going to make sure that they're not being exploited? Well, I think there's one big reason why they shouldn't be exploited, particularly these days, and that is that we have a really open, transparent market where people can compare between insurance quotes. You can compare between the prices that different insurers are offering, and that means that you're much less likely to be exploited. A good analogy to help you think about the benefit that you get from insurance is to compare it to a security guard. So what is the benefit that you get from a security guard? The benefit is quite intangible. It's security. Like in insurance, it's peace of mind. In the case of a security guard, it's security. Most of the time, the security guard is just standing around doing nothing. But when the situation arises where you have a situation where someone has tried to rob the store or something like that, the security guard jumps into action and he has a really clear role as to what he needs to be doing. Similarly with the insurer, they are going to be sitting on the sidelines the majority of the time, but when the situation arises, like for example, if you have a car accident or your car has damage, they have a very set contractual agreement with you that they need to be doing those certain things, and they'll jump into action. So actually, we see that there is a really strong similarity between an insurance company and a security guard. And a security guard is providing perfectly halal, uncontroversial services. And my point is that if we see insurance in that light as well, then we can understand that actually the benefit that the insurance company is providing when it sells you that premium is actually tangible and beneficial, and similar to the permissible security benefit that you get from having a security guard. In short, insurance these days is a sufficiently clear and certain contract, especially in our time with the big data that we have available. Insurance allows people to have certainty in their lives. This is really, really important for the business world, but also important for people's day-to-day lives. I mean, we're living in coronavirus times these days, and that has brought home that point really, really clearly. The business world is just struggling with all the uncertainty of when it's going to end, when it's not going to end, and even day-to-day lives of individuals have been really, really changed dramatically. The Prophet ﷺ, he specifically allowed a form of transaction called Bay' al-Salam, which allowed the farmers of Medina to have certainty about the prices. Muslim records Ibn Abbas radiallahu anhu reported that when Allah's Prophet came to Medina, they were paying 1 and 2 years in advance for fruits. So he said, those who pay in advance for anything must do so for a specified wait and for a definite time. So he weighed up the uncertainty, Prophet ﷺ, he weighed up this uncertainty, and he gave some criteria to mitigate against that uncertainty, but he allowed for that transaction to carry on, even though the delivery of those fruits wasn't going to happen for a few years. He allowed that because he knew that it was going to make it easier for the people of Medina and the farmers to actually function and get on with their lives. The Prophet ﷺ, he accepted unequal exchanges in certain transactions. Here are two really interesting hadith. So Aisha narrated, I said, O Messenger of Allah, people borrow bread and yeast from their neighbors and they return more or less. Is this permissible? And he said, there is no harm in this. It is a common practice of the people. An increase or diminution is not what they intend. And then in another version of this hadith, he said, so take the larger amount and give the smaller, or take the smaller and give the bigger. The best among you is the one who is best in paying back his debts. So the second hadith is in Bukhari and Muslim, where the Messenger of Allah ﷺ allowed Bay' al-Araya in quantities less than 650 kilograms. Basically, this is these transactions where people would exchange fresh dates for dried dates, which Prophet ﷺ would typically not allow because of the potential uncertainty and the potential for dispute that could arise when exchanging those kind of goods. These hadith are absolutely fascinating, not because they're talking about insurance per se, but because they're making the point that unequal exchanges in certain transactions can be allowed. So in the case of the dates hadith, it's talking about the context of Medina, which is full of farmers, date farmers, and making it easy for them is something that's going to make economics better off in that society. Then in the case of Aisha and her hadith, normally what would happen if you have a debt from your neighbor or from anyone, you should pay back exactly that debt. You know, the fuqaha say that you shouldn't even give a gift in addition to that debt for fear of there being interest. However, Prophet ﷺ here allows it because communal ties and those ties with your neighbor actually trump that concern about avoiding giving excess back when you're giving debt. So the Prophet ﷺ, he set the bar at 650 kilograms. He said, look, anything under that, you can exchange ripe dates for dried dates. That's a pretty high bar. 650 kilograms is a lot of dates. He could have set it at 10 kilograms, but his instinct was to make it easy for people, for business and life to go on. So how is insurance helpful in making easy for businesses and society? Well, insurance is helping businesses being able to predict from month to month what's going to happen. If they have an unexpected crisis, they can deal with that. Insurance also underpins a lot of the larger transactions that take place in our economy. Insurers will typically underwrite transactions in case they fall through. They might even act as guarantors for some of the parties in order to make that transaction happen. So insurance is a key lubricant to this whole economy. Also, insurance creates large pools of wealth, and these are large pools of wealth that are long-term and stable, and these are then invested into key assets and key stocks in our economy, and that's really important for money to be able to circulate properly and for money to be able to circulate over a long-term period, because there's nothing more destabilizing for an economy where you have money that comes in hot and then it gets withdrawn out. That's not helpful for whatever asset that money went into. Assets and stocks and companies like it when money goes into them and stays into them for a while, and that's what insurance can provide. So in a nutshell, the point is that insurance, while it may have a degree of gharar, is firstly not so gharar heavy that it is really, really uncertain, and secondly, that it comes with a great deal of benefits for individuals and wider society. And the Sharia has historically allowed those kind of transactions where there is great benefit, even if it comes at a little bit of risk or a little bit of harm. The Sharia allows it due to the benefit. So scholars unambiguously allow takaful, and our argument is that if you look at it, the conventional model is pretty much near identical to the takaful model, especially economically. And so either both should be prohibited or both should be allowed. And of course, we say that both should be allowed. If you look at specifically the kind of things that there is a similarity, both will be pooling the cash together, they both will be paying their employees and managers and making a profit for the employees and managers, they will both be paying out in the case of a claim, both organizations will be looking to make a surplus as well. And of course, there is an element of reciprocity in this transaction or this contract that is made even on the takaful side. What do I mean by that? So, in the case of the hiba contract with, the tribesman who gave a gift to his fellow tribesman who had killed someone and needed contribution for the blood money, you get that, right? It was a really pure form of a gift. But these days, when you sign up with a takaful company, you're not signing up as a charitable donation to that takaful company, even though structurally, on the paper it says that it's a gift. Actually, when you sign up with a takaful company, you do that expecting very much a benefit out of it, which is that if you have an accident, that takaful company needs to be paying out. So with that in mind, actually, this whole idea that there's this reciprocity involved in insurance, so it's a contract as opposed to a gift, is the same in the takaful side of things as well. And so if that's one of the key reasons why you can't go for insurance, then that has to apply for takaful as well. The point is that the takaful company has already had to compromise at least a little bit in order to fit that blood money gift concept into the modern 21st century, where we've got billions of people living in the world now, and it's completely globalized, it's a different world, and they've had to compromise a little bit. Another way that they've had to compromise is that they are now focused on profit. So the takaful company is very much a company that makes a profit. In fact, all the companies that are actually investing and setting up takaful companies are in the background just mainstream insurance providers. And these companies, believe you me, are not doing this out of the goodness of their heart. They are focused on profit. And that is not a bad thing, right? Because now we're not dealing with a few 100,000 people in a desert. We are dealing with billions of people globally, and we are dealing with major risks that are going to cost billions of pounds. And in order for us to properly mitigate those risks and cover those risks, we need to have large pools of money. And those large pools of money take a lot of administration, a lot of work. It needs a lot of structure around it. And it's just unrealistic to expect this whole thing to be able to work on a really casual gift-based level. There needs to be a profit element to it, and that is not a bad thing. It allows us to get the great benefits that come from insurance, which we would otherwise not have. So a few things to just note here before we wrap up. Firstly, takaful insurance is not under any controversy. Everyone thinks it's permissible, so go for that if you want to, even if you think that insurance mainstream is impermissible. Secondly, if you want to go for life insurance, inshallah we'll do a separate video on that because there's some specific nuances around that. And thirdly, if your law of the land says that you need to have insurance, for example to drive a car, then that is again uncontroversially allowed by Islamic scholars. But to wrap up, we've given 3 key reasons why we think that insurance in the majority of its forms should be viewed as permissible. I'd be really interested to hear your thoughts, and please do subscribe and comment in the comment section below. Assalamu alaikum.